Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could teach the gullible to never be so comfortable with lies they eat like comfort food, to disregard the bogus claims and pseudoscientific claims? Can you imagine just how much indeed the world would change? No more political predators playing on the populace, but ilkes and plots to shift and kill metropolis. No more villains with the title in the Bible, holding phony temper Bibles like the stuff they teach is vital. Imagine it was no one to have to prove a claim you make. If folks really feel ashamed expressing content that was fake, it's not to say we never make mistakes, it's just to say we go out of our way to show the evidence it takes.
Remain skeptical while you travel the road of reason. Stay strapped with logic and facts. That's what it is, yo. Keep reality intact to help the truth grow. Question every claim, especially the ones you believe in. Remain skeptical while you travel the road of reason.
Welcome everybody to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. I'm your host, Larry Mendoza.
I'm your co-host, Grace Tolini.
I'm also co-host, Kay Terzak.
Thank you for joining us. We have a wonderful show today. We have our guest is Baba Brinkman. He's a hip hop artist whose songs topics include things like evolution and the Canterbury Tales, literature, economics, things all nerdy. And he's going to be joining us later on in the show. For now, before we move on to Baba, though, we have a couple of announcements and some news items we'd like to talk about. So, Kayla, do you have an announcement about?
We do. As I announced last week, the Recovering from Religion Foundation, actually, they came out with their hotline project, which is a number that someone who, if you're questioning your religion or if you are having issues, dealing with, falling away or not believing in God anymore, you can call that hotline and get support.
That is great.
Yeah, and it's not a deconversion hotline.
Right, I think we want to stress that this is not a deconversion hotline. It's not designed to force people to deconvert or anything like that, but it's if you're having struggles with your faith and you're trying to get some advice, some help, I guess this is what this hotline is.
It's an ear to listen to, and it's information. We can
it's like
just
an
disseminate
Landers
it.
for people that are, sitting on the fence and not sure what to think, or questioning.
Do we know if people have been using this already? Do we have any?
Yes, actually. It's been heavily, I don't have any statistics in front of me, but I'm sure it's been used pretty well.
I see it as a very important tool because so many people are afraid of really making questions about religion because they just can't because of the environment they live, their families and their society. So for those in the closet atheists, it's great that they can pick up the phone in the privacy of their house and call and see that they are not alone. I think it's really cool.
Right, and then deconversion is a tough process to go through, so this is definitely any tools that people can have, it's very helpful for them to use. So we're glad this is going on, and I think it's 1-844-I-DOUBT-IT is the hotline. If there's any listeners out there who would like to call, feel free to call. All right, so let's move on to another announcement. Just wanted to announce, and we're going to be giving you guys updates as we get information about the Reason Rally 2, which is supposed to happen in the spring of 2016. So it has been announced that it will happen. We don't quite have the dates yet, but we'll keep you updated as we find out.
You and I have attended the first one, and it was just amazing. I've never seen such a huge gathering of free thinkers, and the speeches were wonderful. The weather didn't help, but even though we were all reined in, we stayed there, and it was just, at the beautiful DC Mall, it was just really a wonderful event, and I can just imagine what the next one will be like. Yeah,
and hopefully we'll be getting some big names, and it'll be fun. It's always a good time. It's a big party for atheists, basically. So. All right, I want to announce here that on March 29th, HBO will be having a documentary on Scientology called Going Clear, and it's supposed to uncover all of the crimes of Scientology. It's going to be, apparently this thing is supposed to, it really ticked off a lot of the Scientology community because it's really going to expose a lot of the crimes. As a pregame show, I would like to invite our viewers to join us here at 3 o'clock on Road to Reason, because we're going to have two guests, Mark Ebner and Chris Shelton. Mark Ebner is an investigative journalist who has uncovered a lot of these crimes that Scientology has done throughout the years. Chris Shelton, he was on our show before. He is a former Scientologist, and he will be also coming on our show to help us discuss Scientology and the crimes. I think out out of all the religions, Scientology is really one of the most just corrupt and downright what they do is illegal. So.
Do you know if other than HBO is going to show it, is there any way that the viewers can see it?
My understanding, it's an HBO production, so you gotta have a subscription to HBO to have it. Now,
I thought it was going to be in the theaters too. I'm not sure.
That I'm not sure. I know HBO will be airing it. Good news is HBO is having HBO Go. I don't know if it's going to be ready by then, but if you have
a password
online, if you have a password, then you can watch it online at some point. I'm not sure where they are with that project. So. All right, so let's move on to some news items. Grace, you have some interesting news items?
Yeah, like, every week we follow what's going on in the news when it comes to religion, and there's always something absurd, So lately I've been noticing a trend, and they call it religious freedom, which sounds very nice, right? Religious freedom. Oh, you can believe in anything you want in this country, where freedom of expression and freedom of belief. But this is something different. This is not about freedom. This is about discrimination. It's actually politicians trying to introduce bills that allow religious people to discriminate against certain groups, especially against atheists, right? So there was a bill 1125, that has been already approved by the Republican majority in Oklahoma, and it would end secular marriage licenses in the state. In addition, the bill would bar judges from performing marriages in Oklahoma. And here's what they said. They said marriage was not instituted by government. It was instituted by God. There is no reason for Oklahoma or any other state to be involved in marriage. What do you guys think about that?
So this sounds like it's a license to discriminate, is what I'm getting.
Right.
So basically they're hiding behind the cloak of religious freedom,
right,
so that they can continue to discriminate.
And it gets worse. So now in Georgia, there is another bill that is going to be voted. It's called the Georgia Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and they want to pass this bill allowing businesses and individuals to discriminate against others and allow abuse against wives and children in the name of religious freedom. So you can discriminate against people that are homosexuals or atheists or basically any other group based on your religion, and this is setting a very dangerous precedent. We're becoming very close to ISIS.
Right.
I'm not sure if we're close
not
to
there,
ISIS.
well, a better example, the Taliban.
Well,
maybe not Taliban, but yeah.
I think that they are setting these types of religious theocratic type of legislation, which is, I think, a problem that a lot of atheists face is discrimination. And it's problematic when we have legislation that is based on religion,
right?
Because it does give the freedom to discriminate, and not just atheists, gays, women. It's everybody.
It's against the Constitution. It's not separation of church and state at all. That's against what the founding fathers were talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No, but what I was saying is that there are a lot of legislatures right now, state legislatures, county legislatures, that are working to undermine church-state separation.
Right.
This is just an example, but we're seeing this all over the place.
James Madison said, sorry Larry, the purpose of separation of church and state is to keep forever from these shores the ceaseless strife that has soaked the soil of Europe in blood for centuries. Okay? The founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, also said this was George Washington, the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. And Thomas Jefferson, Christianity is the most perverted system that has ever shown on man. And people still say this is a Christian nation. So.
The thing about integrating church and state, the problem that we've always seen is it doesn't benefit anyone except for one group. Only one group will be able to, have that kind of benefit.
Right.
And what we're seeing here is a specific kind of evangelical Christian is going to have that benefit. And even for me, I used to be a part of a smaller non-denominational church, and we were very much against, getting involved in politics because of that. Because this is not it doesn't benefit. It didn't benefit us to have Christianity in the government.
And that's an interesting point that you make, because separation of church and state not only protects minority groups, but it protects other religious minority groups from, say, a major religion. Imagine how a lot of Protestants would feel if Catholicism took over.
And that's how it was in Europe, during the Roman Empire. It was all about the Catholic Church, and if you dared question it, you were persecuted, you were killed. And then the Protestants, they had to fight a lot of people to be able to open their own church, their own segment.
I think that the Christians in this country forget the history of why
they have no notion of history.
Yeah,
that is
why they came here in the first place.
So, is marriage a Christian thing? I mean, honestly,
No,
I don't
it's
think
not.
it's a very civil about property rights.
It's a civil.
Specifically about the right of a man to pass his daughter on to another man,
Right.
as a means of keeping specific, so we don't have like crazy stuff happening with incest, and I don't know. I kind of feel like
Well, there's many purposes to it, but it's
property
actually a legal contract between a couple, whether it's man and man, woman, whatever, and if people decide that they want to have a religious celebration on top of it, fine. If you belong to a certain religion, you want to have you're a priest or pastor or a celebrant that is even atheist. I had an atheist wedding.
Right.
So we had somebody from the Ethical Society who just read the vows, and there was no mention of
You
God.
said
It was
something
beautiful.
earlier. You said something earlier that made a lot of sense, and I guess we do have to wrap up soon. But you said that people get mistaken between the idea of a wedding and marriage.
And they're two different
marriage
things.
is a civil thing, whereas
Right.
wedding can be whatever you want it to be.
Right.
Marriages are not. You don't have a marriage unless the state actually admits that you have a marriage.
Absolutely, and it's not valid. It's not considered recognized unless the state recognizes it.
Yeah.
So, but this is a great conversation. I'm sure we can go on and talking about this, but we gotta go to public service announcements here in about. Tell our guests to stay on, because right after the public service announcements, we have a short video that Kayla put together to introduce Baba Brinkman, and we'll come back on with Baba here in a few minutes.
Homemade noodles. Marty, stop it. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. It reminds me, I've been thinking maybe we should try a new form of birth control. I heard about this one. It's called the IUD, intrauterine device. Or we could try the patch on your arm. Actually, I think that one goes on your butt.
Bedsider.org has birth control information and a lot more. And it's...
What do you think, then? Arm or the butt?
There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube, and remember to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, or there'll be hell to pay.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
Hi, may I please have an application? Thank you.
Skip Get your diploma.
Okay.
Take that first step towards a better future. Find free adult education classes at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome to the future. Geek Pop 3. Yeah.
Baba Brinkman is a Canadian rap artist, writer, actor, and tree planter. And he lends his talents to the skeptic community and to education. Skepticism? He's got a rap for that.
Pseudo-mystics, pseudo-psychics.
Crazy fundamentalist family? He's got a rap for that.
Job which explains all of its predictive successes, or we have to separate God from the scientific method. And that's when my sister steps in to defend a different kind of creationism, cultural creationism, also known as social constructivism or postmodernism. She says, Baba, the Western scientific method is just as subjective as every other culture.
The beauty of evolution? He's got a rap for that.
Darwin spilled the first splashes of his universal acid. The effects were like magic, burning human arrogance into ashes.
He is best known for his award-winning hip-hop theater shows, including The Rap Guide to Evolution and The Canterbury Tales Remixed, which interpret the works of Darwin and Chaucer for a modern audience.
Okay, I got creationist cousins with my relations, I love them, but at the dinner table we get on some crazy discussions. I'm always questioning the basic assumptions and said, yes, I believe we came from monkeys, okay.
All right, welcome back to Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century. I'm your host, Larry Mendoza, and with me I have...
Grace Tolini.
And Kay Terzak.
All right. Welcome back. We are going to now introduce, actually you've seen the introductory video hopefully, Baba Brinkman. He's a hip-hop artist who likes to rap about interesting topics, not just, he doesn't do your typical raps. He started out doing, I believe, the Canterbury Tales. We'll let him talk a little bit about that. And then that was picked up by some biologists, and they wanted him to do raps about evolution and science. And so he's kind of made a name for himself in rapping about geeky and nerdy things, which is great.
I'm so curious to see how he got to that.
Yeah. So welcome, Baba. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. How am I coming through?
You're coming through great. Thank you for joining us. So, Baba, every time we have, I think it's very important to what you're doing. I think from an educational standpoint, is brilliant, using music to educate people. I think that's great, especially in topics like evolution and things along those lines. But I want to get into a lot of that. But before that, why don't you give us a little bit of your background? Where are you from? Were you always interested in hip-hop? What came first? Education, hip-hop? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Chicken or egg?
Sure. So I grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And my parents ran a reforestation company, so I used to be a tree planter back in the day. And I was also a big literature nerd, so I did a comparative lit undergrad degree and then a master's. And somewhere along the way in my comparative lit degree, I got really interested in the connection.
Oh, we lost Baba. We can we'll get him back on here shortly. But
yeah, I wanted to ask him. See, he has a degree in English literature, right? So, what made him transition to science and evolution? I mean, that's in biology. I really wanted to hear that from him.
As an English major, I think that one of the things that I felt, having been in an English major, I feel like I have a lot of the ability to compile knowledge, but coming out with an English degree, I kind of feel like I don't have the knowledge to compile. So it makes me want to go back and learn more
it actually makes you
use
think.
the skills.
It actually makes you think and question. I mean, all the humanities, basically, right?
Right. I mean, I think once I studied biology in college, but we have to take a lot of other classes, English lit. So I think there's always an interest in education and critical thinking leads you automatically, I think, to and we'll let obviously Baba speak for himself on this, but in my experience anyway.
But I tend to think that the technical degrees like engineering, computer science, math, etc., they don't lead so much to this questioning as do humanities, like languages or English lit or sociology and history and all that,
Right.
So
looks like we got Baba back.
Yeah, so we got Baba back. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, wonderful. Sorry about that. Please continue on. So you were talking about you were raised in British Columbia, you said? Or Vancouver?
Yeah. I'm not sure how far I got before it cut, but I can go back to.
Sure.
I basically I was into rap since I was about 11 years old. At around 18 or 19, I started rapping myself, and at the time I was doing a comparative literature degree, so I started sort of rewriting Geoffrey Chaucer's poetry into rap as a sort of way of bringing the medieval stories to life for a modern audience. And I really sort of I made an argument in my master's thesis that rap is a sort of natural inheritor of the linguistic tradition of Chaucer and Shakespeare, and even going back to like Homer and the sort of oral bardic tradition of telling stories with rhyme. That's what rappers do. So it was a sort of historical, cultural evolution analogy that I made. And that's, it seemed like a weird idea, but nobody was doing anything with literature and rap that I could see. So I thought, well, maybe I'll be the rapper that, brings old literature to life. Mm-hmm. And that sort of segued into science at one point when some biology teachers and scientists said, well, you did a good job retelling the Canterbury Tales, so maybe you could try the origin of species.
So who was the? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just curious. What got you into skepticism specifically? A lot of your music has to do with skepticism and environmentalism. A lot of very liberal ideas. Mm-hmm. What made you go that route as opposed to just doing literature, which is your background?
Oh, wait, you think skepticism is an inherently liberal idea?
No, not skepticism, but like some of the other...
Hopefully you're going to reach out to some Republicans.
Right.
Yeah. We're actually talking about that, actually, on the CPAC
we were, yeah.
But no, that's a good question. Actually, I would not have called myself a skeptic prior to about 5 or 6 years ago. And ironically, the rap project of translating the Canterbury Tales into rap, or sorry, not the Canterbury Tales, the Origin of Species, trying to rap about Darwin and his theory made me a skeptic, basically, because I come from a very liberal background, so I kind of grew up knowing that I was on the evolution side of the evolution versus creationism debate. But I wasn't extremely well educated in evolution. I just knew that I agreed that it happened, but I didn't know sort of how deep the rabbit hole went with that. So I would have called myself agnostic or maybe even like spiritualist in a way, because as an artist, I kind of felt like there might be a spiritual or supernatural dimension to the creative process.
Right.
Because when you try to come up with a story or write a song, it just appears in your head seemingly from nowhere. And I was familiar with a lot of rappers who basically said, when I rap, I'm channeling a spirit, or I'm speaking speaking for God, or the divine is passing through me, or whatever. And I was like, well, how do I know that that's not the case? Because when I rap, I don't know where it comes from either. So I did have this feeling like there must be a supernatural because of my experiences with creativity. And then at a certain point, I was like, okay, well, I now have to understand the evolutionary theories so I can rap about them. And I read The Moral Animal by Robert Wright, and The Mating Mind by Geoffrey Miller, and The Blank Slate by Steven Pinker, and The Blind Watchmaker by Richard Dawkins, and The Third Chimpanzee by Jared Diamond, and Consilience by E.O. Wilson. And once I got my way through those books, I was well, obviously there's a very good explanation for how you can be creative from an evolutionary perspective that requires no supernatural. So, why do I need to cling to it? I don't really believe in it anymore.
Exactly. And you do an amazing job at putting across, Darwin's theory of evolution through rap. I mean, and my understanding is your rap was peer reviewed. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that concept has ended up really catching on, but it wasn't my idea. The original scientist was Dr. Mark Palin. He's at the University of Warwick in England now, and he's a bacterial geneticist, but he's also a big hip hop fan, strangely enough. And when he reached out to me and said, he's got some funding from the British Council, he's organizing a Darwin symposium with evolutionary experts from across England, and he wants me to be the rap entertainment at his event. You could sort of feel like he was under some pressure, because he had this funding, and they didn't tell him what to spend it on. They just said, you can hire an entertainer. So, he could have hired a string quartet, but he wanted a rapper. And so once he's going to have a rapper there, then, if the rapper says the wrong thing or perpetuates any of the misconceptions about evolution, then that will get him in trouble with his peers. So he kind of laid this condition down here. He was like, I want you to rap about Darwin, and I'm going to hire you, but you have to send me your lyrics in advance so that I can be confident that what you're going to say is true to Darwin's theory today. And so then I was sending him the lyrics, and then I started joking that he was peer reviewing me. And then when I said it on stage at this concert, I was like, don't worry, I've been peer reviewed. This is peer reviewed rap. It got a big laugh, and everybody started talking
really
about
cool.
that. So now that's my brand. I'm the peer reviewed rapper. I do it with all my projects now.
That's very cool.
So that's what I was going to ask. Do you have other projects that actually you have professionals in the field and you have them vetted? I mean, and I want to talk about a little bit about some of your other projects, but do you do that now? You said regularly.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I have several. How far do you want me to go? The next one after Rap Guide to Evolution was called the Rap Guide to Human Nature, and I got peer review input from Steven Pinker, from Olivia Judson, from David Buss, from David Sloan Wilson, from Jonathan Haidt, Rob Brooks. These are all popular science authors and researchers in the field of evolutionary psychology, and they all had something to say. Sarah Hurdy gave me a peer review, and then the most recent one is the Rap Guide to Religion, which is currently running off Broadway, and I've gotten input from Jonathan Haidt on that one, and from John Tehan and Ed Slingerland and people in the field of evolutionary religious studies. And the newest one that's going to come out shortly is going to be a Rap Guide to Medicine, which is about the evolutionary understanding of disease and how you can only understand disease when you know how the body's evolved and how the limitations and constraints and trade-offs involved with evolution leave the body vulnerable to certain kinds of conditions, which is a whole new way of understanding medicine and disease. And that was peer-reviewed by Randy Nesse and several of his colleagues who are the originators of evolutionary medicine as a discipline.
So your educational background, that is in literature. Did you go back to school and get any kind of an educational background in the topics that you're rapping about, or is it mostly gathering information and reading things on your own and the peer review, obviously, having people actually vet the information?
It's all very self-directed stuff. I read the books and I take notes, and well, I mean, I think the peer review process with the experts helps a lot as well. With the Rap Guide to Medicine project that is finished, Randy Nesse, who commissioned it, he sent me 4 textbooks that are the core texts of evolutionary medicine, and so then I'm writing the raps based on those, and then I send him an email with the lyrics, and then he will forward that to the author that wrote the textbook that I was trying to interpret in rap. And within a 24-hour period, I finished writing the rap, got the feedback from the peer reviewer, made changes to the lyrics, recorded them, and somebody's working on a music video animation and engineers putting the song together and stuff. So, I don't have any formal education in science, but I did take some undergraduate biology courses as part of my English degree just for breadth requirements, and I just read tons of popular science stuff.
And Baba, I want to ask you this. So, first I want to compliment you for the lyrics. They're amazing and very they even rhyme, and the visuals of your videos. They're really, really amazing. And my question is, do you see yourself as an atheist celebrity in the likes of Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye?
Well, I think it's presumptuous for me to say yes to a question like that.
Loaded question.
That wasn't the kind of career I necessarily had engineered for myself. But if I am being celebrated by atheists, then I'm perfectly comfortable about that, because I do want to promote reason.
Absolutely.
But my big flag that I wave isn't so much reason or rationality, although I obviously do promote those things. But it's just good ideas. I think there's good ideas and bad ideas, and I think I think science is based on some really good ideas, and I think religion is mostly based on bad ideas. So that's the way
That's great. That's great.
Real quick though, do you have any place where you list any of the books that you read for your raps? Because I'd be interested in taking a look at that, and I'm sure our viewers would be interested in what kind of books that you use for this information.
Yeah, if you go to my website is music.bababrinkman.com. Actually, just bababrinkman.com. But if you're interested specifically the peer review list at music.bababrinkman.com, you can see all the albums. And when you click on the albums, then beneath it, there will be links to papers, articles, peer review journals, books. I do put that up there for people to follow up on. Yeah.
Cool.
So, quick question. So you're saying, and I know my understanding is you're at a Playhouse right now because you have an off-Broadway show. And what is that called right now?
That's Rap Guide to Religion.
The Rap Guide to Religion, right. And have you done other off-Broadway shows, or is this the first one?
This is the fourth one, actually. I've done 4 off-Broadway shows in the last 4.5 years here in New York. And they've all been, well, one of them was the Canterbury Tales remix. So that, that one wasn't a strictly like science communication show. Although in my interpretation of the Canterbury Tales, I do get my rationality swerve on a little bit in the way that I put a spin on it. Like, for instance, in The Merchant's Tale, there's this thing about how the gods have endowed people with different kinds of talents in order to, get the best of each other. And I basically just point out that the story that's being told could actually just be about evolutionary arms races, and that's just as good of an explanation about how people get talents to compete with each other for to get an edge. But in the old days, they used to think the gods gave them to us, things like that. So there's been 4 shows. The Rap Guide to Evolution was the first, and you played a bit of the music video, Creation is Cousins, with me around the table with my cousins.
I love that one.
It's one of the scenes in the play, Creation is Cousins, and then there was a Rap Guide to Human Nature, which was off Broadway. The title here was actually Ingenious Nature, and it's about sort of sex and dating and evolutionary psychology. And then there was the Canterbury Tales, and then the new one is Rap Guide to Religion. So these are full. They're like a 90-minute long play with some rap concert scenes and some sort of character storytelling and some stand-up comedy and some lecture like TED Talk bits. And it's all about trying to get the ideas across in as entertaining a manner as possible.
Yeah, I'm understanding some of the reviews have called it, part TED Talk, part hip hop show, part Broadway show. So it's pretty interesting. Now, real quick, if you're on a speakerphone, could you get off of it, because I think we're having issues with your voice. Just as a FYI.
I'm not.
Okay. All right. Good.
That's cool.
So,
I could try getting on a headset though. That might be better.
That's
maybe.
fine. I think you're okay. We just got asked by our producers.
So, Baba, I can imagine that you're a big hit with college kids. Have you been touring colleges across the nation?
Dozens. Interesting.
Okay.
So you do. So that's the follow-up question is: do you actually tour? I know you're busy with the off-Broadway show, but do you actually have concert tours? And if so, when's your next one?
Well, I mean, with off-Broadway shows, they've been more sparse, because I do 5 shows a week here. But I do get some time off to go. Like on Thursday, I'm flying down to Phoenix to perform at the Arizona State University. A couple weeks ago, I was at Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario, in northern Ontario, in Canada. I've got one coming up in Wichita, Kansas, in April, and in May I'm going to the Orlando Fringe Festival, and also performing in Niagara Falls at like a biodiversity conference.
Very cool.
Kind of a mix of stuff. It's like some festivals, some off-Broadway theater type stuff, and some college campus events, and sometimes like science museums as well.
Oh yeah!
Wow.
Sometimes book it.
Well, it's peer reviewed, so.
Yeah, I mean it's peer reviewed, so it fits right in. Do you? I know I've asked you this in the past. We've had other hip hop artists here on our show, people like Sickness from the Grand Unified Movement, and I know you've done some collaboration with these guys. Do you often do collaborations with people, or are you mostly a solo guy?
I would say I'm majority solo, but I've done quite a few collaborations. I mean, I put out my first rap record in 2004, and since then I've released more than a dozen albums, and only for the past 5 or so years have there been any science themes to the albums. And before that, I was just putting out records like Canadian rap music about my sort of subcultures at home and experiences in life. And I don't know, I probably put out songs with I don't know, 6 or 8 different rappers as collaborators. One of them was with Cygnus.
Yep.
We had a song called Naturalism on one of my records, and but I mean, I'm mostly a solo artist. I like collaborating with singers a lot, who sing like soulful style R&B hooks and stuff on my songs, because I'm not a singer, I'm more of a lyricist.
Sure, and I've noticed that on your albums, and I really dig them. I think they're wonderful. Quick question. So, I know you have that song Creationist Cousin. Has the topics of your rap caused any controversies with family or with the general public, or has it been fairly well received?
I don't know. I talked to my cousins about what they thought of that Creationist Cousins video, and some of them were more positive than others. But I think their criticism of the video was that they thought that my tone in the way that I represented them, was a little bit disrespectful and frivolous and dismissive. But I said, okay, that's kind of like what satire is about. And I was making fun of you, obviously, so I understand. But what do you think of the actual content of the words I put in your mouth? Do they represent your views accurately? And they said, yes, they do, actually. It was just the tone we didn't like.
Because
so as far as I'm concerned, that's mission accomplished.
Yeah,
right.
My impression of your raps is that you're not really criticizing religious people. It's very actually respectful, and you really focus on science. You really focus on evolution, and so that's probably better received than if you were criticized. Like there are other people on YouTube that are bashing religious people, in a very offensive way. So, and what has been your reception in the Bible Belt? Have you been around there?
Yes, I have. Actually, about a year ago, I did a tour that included Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Tennessee, and I've done performances in all those states. And the point of the tour was actually that there was a documentary film crew coming along and sort of filming interactions and conversations with people who were creationists who would see me perform my evolution rap, and then have a conversation either with me or with someone else, and just using the performance as a way to get people talking about the issues, and even maybe connect with people in a way that maybe an argument can't get the ideas across, but maybe if you can make them laugh or give them a good time, maybe art can make a connection in a way that just argument on its own can't, and that's what we're exploring with the film.
Yeah.
And the response is the response is generally positive to the performance. They'll say, obviously I don't agree with you, but it's funny, or I had a good time, or I didn't really get much hostility in terms of the response.
Good.
But it's also, not everyone's going to come to the show. The challenge is to persuade them to come to the show before you can make them laugh or make them think. You got to get them through the door.
And I bet you get a lot of joy out of the creative process. Like you were talking about before, where you wondered at the beginning, whether or not there was some kind of spirit out there, because you'd look at your page and you'd be like, well, I know when I make something artistically, I'll look at the work and I'll step back and I'll just be like, wow. Did I do that? And I'm sure that, is that something that you experience, that kind of creative joy that you get out of looking at your work and stepping back and saying, wow, satisfaction.
Totally.
That's kind of ambiguous.
The principle of humility seems to prevent you from wanting to take credit for it as well. And I think that drives a religious impulse in a lot of cases, because people create something that they feel like it would be almost like hubris to take credit for it, so they give credit to a divine being instead. Maybe I should credit my subconscious instead. My subconscious is much smarter than I am. But the process, it does give rise to mystical feelings. I think that's a very natural experience that people have, and can be. I talk about it in this Rap Guide to Religion show that I'm doing right now, about all the reasons, the reasons for religion's existence that are based on some kind of universals of human experience and psychology, and that would definitely be one of them. And I do still get a pleasure out of it. I did a song on one of my albums that came out in 2006 called Blind Faith, and the idea behind the song was that there's only one kind of blind faith I have, and that's faith in my own
potential to succeed with creativity. And that really requires blind faith in a way, because there are so many artists competing and most of them don't make it. And how much faith does it take to keep at it even though the odds look so bad? And each time you sit down at the blank page, you're like, if you have no ideas, you're like, well, how do I know something's going to come this time? You got to have faith in a way, but it's not faith in the supernatural, it's faith in the creative process or in your subconscious or whatever's driving.
And I think that's something that comes across on your work. I think that's something it's very beautiful. I found your work extremely beautiful. I have actually recently come out of religion, and it was a very interesting religious situation that I won't go into, but one of the things that I feel like I lost coming out of religion is this worshipful tone. And I hate to use the word worshipful because when you get a bunch of people who identify as atheists together, typically there's this reaction against terms that would be otherwise construed as, religious.
Like, oh my God.
But honestly, especially your video, Darwin's Acid, that's what it's called, right?
Yes, Darwin's Acid. And we will be showing that video at the end of the show, by the way. So.
Yeah, but it gave me that worshipful feeling. I sat there and I almost cried at the point where you're talking about humility and the fact that when we think of where we came from, we don't have the ability to sit there and have pride in our individual selves in that way. And it was such a beautiful thought that it brought me back to the good feelings that I got from my religious experience. And it was just a beautiful feeling. And I'm glad that we have someone like you out there who's able to draw that out and have a very scientifically accurate, realistic understanding of the item.
And also, I'd like to add that, the millennials is the largest growth in secularism in this country, in the whole world actually, are the millennials, people like you, right? Your generation. And so I think you really speak to them. You're like probably an idol to them, and I think that's great.
So what do you think when you hear that kind of stuff?
But, I do think it's really important to just remind people that the feeling of awe and transcendence and wonder is not exclusively available to religious people. That's a universal human thing, and there are other sources besides the supernatural that we can get that from. We can get it from contemplating the cosmos and our place in it and the wonders of the universe. We can get it from communing with nature, and I think the word worship, is actually appropriate. I feel like I worship nature. I get a feeling of being in something larger and more too hard to contemplate. You lose yourself in it. You're sort of absorbed into a higher transcendent domain when you're in nature. And it's the same with community as well. When you're part of a group of people and you're all in it together for some kind of higher purpose, those feelings drive religious participation, but they're not intrinsic to it. It's not necessary to be religious to have them.
It is a challenge. It really is a challenge to try to show this kind of awe and awe-inspiring feeling to people who are religious, that you can find that elsewhere. It's very difficult to do. It comes to mind. Carl Sagan did a wonderful job at putting wonder and awe in cosmology and in our universe, and so to be able to do that is really tricky. And so and you're doing it very well. So I hope you continue to make videos like that, because I think that the Darwin's Acid was really that hit home. It was
like Taylor said, your creativity is just amazing.
So another question for you. So I think it's important that atheists out there and rationalists, whichever word you want to choose, go out there as artists and expose the masses to this type of work. But it can be challenging, and I wanted to know, how do you meet, or do you have any challenges in getting support for what you do? I know it's hard enough to be a musician, but then one that's really going out there attacking things like creationism and even religion to a certain extent. Is it challenging for you to get support?
Well, in practice, it's very difficult to separate the challenges of just being an independent artist, period, with the challenges of being an independent artist that promotes skepticism and rationality in science and work. Because I can, if I get a no from somebody, if I write to somebody and say, I'm going to be in the area, would you be interested in setting up a gig? Or if I sort of because I do have to self-promote a lot. I'm not at the point in my career where people are just throwing money at me for shows left, right, and center. I have to reach out to people and say, okay, this is what I do. Would you be interested in hosting a performance? And lots of the time I get a no from somebody, and I have to, then I naturally will wonder, I wonder where that no came from. Is that because they're not into rap? Is that because they're, was there a religious objection, or was it political correctness because they think talking about religion and skepticism is going to be offensive to other people, or did they not even like my style? That's something that's just very difficult to answer in practice. But the bottom line is, I haven't had a day job for over 10 years now.
Wow.
I've just made a living from performing, recording, and releasing music and videos, and well, actually I don't really make any money from the videos. They're just for promotion. But that gets me gigs that then pay the bills. And as long as I can pay the bills with it, I got married a year and a half ago, and I have a 15-month daughter now and stuff. So it's about, I got to support my family with this.
Absolutely.
If the gigs dry up, I'll have to get a day job. But knock on wood, it hasn't happened yet.
Well, it seems exactly. It seems like you're doing well for yourself so far. So I hope I wish you continued success. It's definitely, it can be tough. I know a lot of musicians that have to give it up.
So what do you consider yourself? I mean, we've talked around it, but a lot of people have words that they identify as, and sometimes in the skeptic community, atheist community, we can build people up as something that they're not. For instance, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's used as an atheist voice, and he said plenty of times that that's not something that he wants to be identified as. He's a scientist. Please, I don't want to sit there and rant about religion all the time. So what do you see yourself as? What's your, what do you do?
All of the above.
Yeah.
I think I'll cop to atheist, rationalist, skeptic. I see them as I understand that they're distinct, that they're not necessarily all the same, but I think they all have a lot of areas of overlap. And it sort of depends on the context and the question. I don't necessarily feel the need to wave the atheist flag out of context. I don't wear atheist T-shirts or say, "Hey, guess what? I'm an atheist" in conversation, unless somebody makes a claim that's based on religion that I think is a dodgy claim. I'll often challenge it and say, "Well, how do you know that's true?" And that often will turn the conversation towards them asking me what I believe, and then I'll say, well, I'm an atheist since you asked, But I feel like it's important to claim atheist if you are, because of the persecution and social injustice that accrues to atheists and has for as long as somebody's, as long as the designations existed, there's been persecution, and there still is. And in sort of 8 or 9 countries in the world today, being an atheist is still punishable by death. It's a capital offense. And, apostasy is a close cousin, just like leaving the Muslim religion for any other religion is punishable by death in lots of countries, or leaving it entirely and becoming an atheist is punishable by death. And, that's an extreme version of something that exists in America as well, which is if you bring up the fact that you're an atheist to polite conversation, people are somehow offended just by that fact, or think that you're attacking them. And that's just about people being unfamiliar with atheists and having negative stereotypes about them. It's very similar. I agree with Richard Dawkins. It's very similar to the gay rights movement. So more people need to be out if that's what they are.
Absolutely.
And if Neil deGrasse Tyson really thinks that there's a chance that there's a God and he doesn't want to call himself an atheist, then that's his prerogative. But I don't think that there's any likelihood that there's a supernatural being looking over us or behind all this stuff. So I think I'm comfortable proclaiming that and saying atheist.
Yeah. You grew up in a liberal environment, you said, but were you guys religious at all, or did you have to have a moment? You said you had a moment where you came away from spiritualism, but was there ever tell me if this is a personal question, but a more religious aspect of that?
No, it's fine. I'm totally comfortable with it. We never went to church. Actually, that's not true. We went to church on Easter and Christmas sometimes, but that was more for my grandparents. My grandparents are all religious. The ones who are still alive still are regular churchgoers. My parents were never religious in terms of organized religion, but they are certainly not skeptics. They're spiritualists. They believe in reincarnation and meditation, but meditation in the sort of like supernatural energy running through you, and so they were into the sort of mystical side of spirituality, but also had a sort of many paths to the divine attitude towards it. They weren't against religion; they were just against the sort of corruptions of it found in systematized churches or whatever. So I kind of grew up spiritual and grew up believing in the supernatural in some sense, but not in any of the sort of doctrinaire religious versions of it. And so 5 or 6 years ago was when I went through a conversion and said, okay, actually I'm what they call a philosophical naturalist, which is actually my favorite of all the terms, because if you're a philosophical naturalist, that means you're a skeptic, a rationalist, and an atheist, and lots of other things. But you also think there's no soul, and that everything has a natural cause that science is capable of, in principle, of investigating. So that's what I came around to, mostly just because of doing more homework than I had done before. Sure. I hadn't investigated the things that I formerly considered the basis of my spirituality and my belief in the supernatural, and when I did properly investigate them, the basis of them kind of fell apart.
Do you have a favorite song or a favorite topic to rap about?
What, a favorite song that I wrote?
Yeah. Do you have one that you're just like, I really like this one?
I'll tell you, one of my favorites in practice is this song called "I'm a African." Yeah. And it's not even. I didn't even write. I mean, I wrote a version of it, but it's actually a sort of a remix of a song by a rap group called Dead Prez. And Dead Prez's version is about specifically black nationalism and Afrocentricity. And their point is, black people in America and in the Caribbean and anywhere in the world know that they have a common heritage in Africa, so they should all connect with each other more than they connect with whatever country they happen to live in, because they're actually Africans at heart and in terms of their genealogy. So I kind of flip that and say, well, that's true of all human beings on the planet, actually, if you just go back 500 centuries instead of 500 years. So, I mean, that sounds like a sort of like, clever concept or whatever, but in practice, I can get a room full of white people in their 60s shouting, "I'm an African" at the top of their lungs by laying out the scientific case and then kind of coaxing them into it. And it takes a whole warm up. If I stand on stage and say I'm an African, everyone's going to stare at me like
we do have
to. We have about 30 seconds left, and I'm going to have to cut it off right here. I do want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been great. I hope you can come back. We'd like to promote your show. I want to tell the audience that you do have an off-Broadway show that's playing through the end of March. So if you're in the New York area, please go see Rap Guide to Religion with Baba. I also want to let our audience know next week's show is Secularism in South America with David Tamayo and Sarah Levin. We're going to leave you now to watch one of Baba's videos, Darwin's Acid. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you guys for watching. Baba, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun.
In 1859, Darwin spilled the first splashes of his universal acid. The effects were like magic, burning human arrogance into ashes, in pretty much the same way that Copernican math did. No, the stars don't shine just to improve the view from Earth. No, we're not the center of the universe. No, we weren't created in the image of Jupiter. No, we're not so special. And yes, the truth hurts. But that's how evolution works. Once it's been applied, the acid burns its way into the superstitious side of the human mind and fills it with light. It even dissolves the original sin of pride. That pride that says, I'm a special creation, and my Creator has given me dominion over nature, and He has the power to replenish His creatures. So if species go extinct, well, He can recreate them later. And if He doesn't, well, that's just part of His plan. But Darwin's acid is hard to withstand. It It plucks the arrogance deep from within the hearts of man and teaches us never to build our houses on sand, but instead to try to understand why we're here. Just one species among millions in this biosphere, with millions of ancestors behind us, whose fighting spirits combine to give us this great survival gear. These minds, these limbs, these incredible tools, perfected by millennia of competitive use. And yes, these attention-seeking genitals too. Without them, these human forms could never improve. It's such an elegant view, filled with breadth and grandeur. And yet some people react with depression and anger and say it's so unsympathetic, it's so viciously random. What's the point of compassion or ethical standards if this is all just a game that these organisms are trapped in, genetically adapting to environmental factors? Then there's no responsibility for individual actions. It's nihilistic. Where's the governing dynamic? Well, once again, Darwin gives us some answers. He says, yes, everything from violets to violence to viruses, it's all just organisms adapting to environments. If you're alive, it's because your ancestors were the best survivalists. They were the finalists in the genetic Olympic Games. Every one of your ancestors survived to reproductive age, and they were all better than their competitors at getting laid. Otherwise, you just wouldn't be sitting here today. Some say it's cynical, but I find something inspirational in this vision of Darwin's, and it goes like this. Organisms are not isolated. Organisms are part of the environmental mix, so your decisions affect evolution. It isn't directionless. Now, before you dismiss me as a mad environmentalist, just try to imagine how natural selection applies to countries that have industrialized. Companies live, and companies die. And when customers buy based on a company's green plans, that affects the economy. Just ask Alan Greenspan. See, cultural evolution is ours to reinvent. Wait, can we affect current events? Yes, we can. And when we choose who to sleep with and reproduce, our sexual choices affect the gene pool. So it's simple. All we need to do is refuse to sleep with mean people, and things will improve. Especially women. On you, the pressure is greater, because men will always do what it takes to get into your favor. That's just in our nature. So if selfish behavior was a sexual graveyard, the effects would be major. In each of these cases, our intentional efforts can play the part of environmental pressures. I can say this is a space where a peaceful existence will never be threatened by needless aggression. I can say this is an ecosystem where people listen, where justice increases over egotism. I can say this is a space where religions achieve coexistence and racism decreases with each coalition. This is my vision of Darwinism and how we factor in. Each of us is a part of the environment. We all pass through it and then we change it and affect the way that other people adapt to it. And afterwards we get to look back and see how we impacted it and maybe have a laugh if our sense of humor is still alive. And what did Charles Darwin do? Darwin threw some light on the origins of mankind, and he left us with skewered pride, but he taught us that yes, there's grandeur in this view of life. There is grandeur in this view of life. And the fact that it also happens to be true is nice. But I can't say it as well as Mr. Charles Darwin. So come on, let's hear your version from the origin.
There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one. And that whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms most beautiful